Have you ever wondered who watches over humanity not as a god, but as something far older, far colder, and far beyond human comprehension? Before there were empires, before there were stars charted and worlds claimed in the name of man, there was only darkness, and within that darkness, a will. A will that would one day become the emperor. But he did not begin as a ruler, nor as a god. He began as a whisper among the first sparks of civilization, a being born not of one mother or father, but of thousands of ancient souls bound together in a single purpose, to protect mankind from itself. In the lost cradle of humanity on a world we now call Terra, the first shamans of prehistoric man foresaw a future drowning in chaos. They saw the birth of the warp, the great sea of souls, and they understood that one day it would devour everything. In desperation, they gathered in secret. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, ended their mortal lives in a single, blood-soaked ritual, binding their spirits into one immortal being. From that sacrifice, he awoke. The first man beyond death. The Emperor. He walked among them in silence for millennia, unseen, unnoticed, shaping humanity's path in subtle ways. Kings rose and fell at his silent guidance. Empires were forged by his hidden hand. He was the philosopher whose words gave birth to wisdom. He was the general whose strategy saved countless lives. He was the prophet who never claimed divinity, the wanderer who watched humanity grow and suffer, again and again. And through it all, he never aged. As millennia passed, the world changed. Stone turned to iron, iron to steel, and the steel to fire. Humanity began to forget its origins, chasing power and greed as the warp whispered louder. Gods of madness fed upon human emotion, and across the unseen dimensions of existence, daemons stirred. The Emperor watched in silence, refusing to interfere until the moment he realized humanity was walking toward extinction. When the flames of the old night erupted, when the warp storm swallowed stars and isolated worlds, he revealed himself. For the first time in human history, the Emperor no longer walked among mortals as one of them, he stood above them. His presence was radiant, terrifying, absolute. He declared one purpose: to unite mankind under one banner, and to cast down the darkness once and for all. He forged the first tools of his conquest, not armies of mortals, but giants of flesh and steel, wrought by his own genetic mastery. The Thunder Warriors, brutal and unstoppable, carved the foundations of his new empire from the ruins of old Earth. The nations that opposed him fell like sand before the tide. Blood ran in rivers, and yet, from that horror, something divine was born, the dream of a unified mankind. By the time Terra finally knelt before him, he was no longer merely a man. To some, he was savior. To others, conqueror. But to those who looked upon his golden eyes and felt their souls tremble, there was no question. He was the Emperor, humanity's final hope against the abyss. And yet, even as the smoke of victory rose above the ruins of Earth, he knew the truth: this was only the beginning. For beyond the cradle of Terra lay a galaxy torn apart by war, isolation, and madness. And to reclaim it, he would need warriors not of blood, but of purpose, sons born from his own divine design. Have you ever wondered what kind of father would forge his own sons, not from love, but from destiny? The Emperor had united Terra under his golden banner, but he knew that victory over one world meant nothing when the stars themselves still burned with war. Mankind was scattered, isolated, lost to time, corruption, and madness. Across the galaxy, entire civilizations had risen and fallen, their names forgotten beneath the dust of endless conflict. And so, the Emperor turned his eyes upward. He would not merely rebuild humanity. He would reshape it. He began a project unlike anything ever attempted before: the creation of 20 beings, not born of wombs, but crafted by his hand. They would be his generals, his children, his reflections. Each one a demigod, shaped with fragments of his own perfection. They would be called the Primarchs. But fate is cruel, and the gods of the warp are crueler still. As the Emperor's grand experiment neared completion, a storm unlike any other swept through the fabric of reality. In a single, shattering instant, the Primarches were torn from their creator and scattered across the galaxy like seeds cast into the wind. The Emperor's dream was shattered before it had even begun. For a time, he said nothing. None could read the expression behind his golden eyes, but those who served him felt the weight of his silence. Then, slowly, he began again. He built new sons, not Primarches, but warriors molded from their genetic blueprints. The Space Marines, the Adeptus Asteroutes. They were smaller, mortal, yet infinitely loyal. They would become the blade with which the Emperor would reclaim his lost children and through them, the galaxy itself. Thus began the greatest military campaign in human history, the Great Crusade. Fleets of golden ships cut through the void like arrows of light, conquering one world after another. Each victory expanded the reach of the Imperium, each conquest brought new hope to the forgotten children of man. And on distant worlds, one by one, the lost Primarches were found. Some were warriors. Some were philosophers. Some were monsters. But all of them, in their own way, were his sons. And though they had been scattered by the warp, each had become the ruler of their own domain, shaping their worlds in their image just as the Emperor had shaped them in his. When father met son, legends were born. Horus, noble and brilliant, became the first, found the Emperor's most trusted, his most beloved. Leman Russ, the Wolf King. Rogaldorn, the unbreakable fortress. Sanguinius, the angel whose wings would one day be drenched in blood. They followed their father into the stars, their loyalty burning like suns. And for a time, humanity knew greatness. The galaxy trembled beneath the march of the Imperium. Billions hailed the Emperor as a god, though he forbade such worship. He called himself not divine, but guardian, a ruler of reason, not faith. Yet the irony was cruel, the more he denied godhood, the more humanity worshipped him. But somewhere deep within the Imperium, the Chaos Gods whispered. They had not forgotten the Emperor, nor forgiven him. And as the Great Crusade spread across the stars, they set their eyes upon his sons, planting seeds of doubt, pride, and jealousy within their hearts. The dream of unity was glorious. But even the brightest light casts a shadow. Stay with me till the end of this story, because the deeper we go, the darker it becomes, and the betrayal that's coming will change the galaxy forever. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that their betrayal felt like the death of your own soul? The Emperor had achieved what no being in human history ever could. The galaxy, once broken and burning, now marched beneath the banner of the Imperium. His armies spanned thousands of worlds. His sons the Primarches led those armies with divine purpose. And at their head stood one name spoken with reverence across the stars, Horus Lupercal, the War Master. He was the brightest of them all. The first found, the most loyal, the most human. To his brothers, he was a leader. To the legions, a god of war. And to the Emperor, he was a son in every sense of the word. When the Emperor returned to Terra to begin his secret project, the mysterious Webway, a plan to sever mankind's dependence on the warp forever, he entrusted Horus with command of the entire Imperium. No greater honor had ever been given. But honor is a dangerous thing. It feeds pride, and pride is the seed of corruption. Far from Terra, in the void-choked region known as the Istvan system, Horus was wounded. A chaos blade tore through his flesh and soul, poisoning him not with steel, but with whispers. In his delirium, the gods of the warp came to him not as monsters, but as guides. They showed him visions of a future where the Emperor ruled not as a guardian, but as a tyrant god. They told him that his father had betrayed his sons, using them as tools for his own ascension to godhood. And Horus believed them. When he awoke, he was no longer the Emperor's son. He was the instrument of his destruction. At first, the betrayal was hidden. Horus moved like a serpent, whispering to his brothers, turning love into doubt, loyalty into resentment. Some refused to believe him. Others were too easily swayed. Soon, half the primarchs had turned their blades against their own kin. What had once been a brotherhood of demigods became a storm of rage and blood. The galaxy burned once more. When the Emperor finally learned of Horus's treachery, it was already too late. The Horus Heresy had begun a civil war of apocalyptic scale. Worlds that had once shouted the Emperor's name in triumph now echoed with screams of betrayal. Legions that had once marched together now tore each other apart. Even the stars seemed to dim as chaos spread like wildfire. Horus's armies descended upon Istvan III, purging their own loyal brothers in fire. Those who remained faithful to the Emperor were slaughtered. The ashes of heroes rained from the skies. And across the Imperium, the truth could no longer be hidden. The War Master had turned against his father. The Emperor watched the dream of unity crumble, knowing that every victory he had built was now being undone by the very son he had loved most. But he could not falter. The fate of humanity itself depended on his will. As Horus gathered his corrupted legions, the Emperor summoned the Loyalists, the unbroken sons who had not given in to chaos. Dorn, Russ, Sanguinius, Guilliman, they would fight not for glory, but for the soul of mankind. The galaxy was now a war zone of brother against brother, God against God, light against shadow. And in the center of it all, the Emperor of mankind faced the most painful truth of all, that his greatest creation had become his greatest failure. The final battle was coming. And it would not just decide who ruled the stars, it would decide whether humanity deserved to survive them. What happens when the God you created comes to destroy you? The galaxy was burning. Entire systems fell to Horus's corruption. The warp bled into real space, and nightmares walked among men. Worlds that had once praised the Emperor's light now screamed his name in hatred. Brother fought brother, legion against legion, as chaos clawed at the heart of humanity. And now, the storm had reached Terra. The Emperor's throne world, the cradle of mankind, the seat of his golden empire, became the final battlefield. Billions stood ready to defend it, from the lowest mortal soldiers to the mightiest primarchs. The skies above were filled with fire as Horus's corrupted fleets descended, blotting out the sun. The loyal sun stood unbroken. Rogel Dorn, stoic as the walls he commanded, prepared the imperial palace for siege. Sanguinius, the angel of Baal, led the defense of the outer bastions, his wings drenched in the blood of daemons. The Emperor himself, still connected to his secret webway project, was forced to abandon it, knowing that if Terra fell, there would be no humanity left to save. The siege began with thunder. For weeks that felt like eternity, the traitor legions rained death upon the palace walls. Titans walking gods of steel clashed in the ruins. The ground was a graveyard of broken machines and burning men. The sky was red with fire, the air thick with the screams of the dying. But still, the loyalists endured. Then, in the final act of desperation, Horus lowered the shields of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, daring the Emperor to face him directly. It was a challenge only one could answer. The Emperor gathered his chosen Rogel Dorn and Sanguinius among them and teleported to the War Master's ship. But the warp twisted their path. When the Emperor arrived, he was alone. There, in the shattered halls of Horus's command deck, destiny reached its end. Sanguinius found Horus first. Once brothers, once bound by love and loyalty, they met in silence. Horus offered him a chance to join chaos, to kneel, to rule at his side. But Sanguinius refused. The two demigods clashed, light against darkness, until Horus's blade pierced the angel's heart. Sanguinius fell, his wings torn and broken, but not before his dying eyes saw what his father would soon face. When the Emperor arrived, he found Horus standing over the body of his son. The silence that followed was heavier than war itself. The duel that came next would decide the fate of humanity. The Emperor pleaded one final time for Horus to abandon his madness. But Horus, consumed by chaos, laughed at the offer. He struck first, and the blow nearly destroyed even the emperor. Each strike shook the ship, each clash of their weapons tore holes through reality. The emperor fought not as a god, but as a father mourning a lost child. Horus fought not as a son, but as vengeance itself. And for the first time in all of history the emperor lost. Broken and bleeding, he saw through the lies. Horus had fallen completely. The soul that once shone brighter than the stars was gone, replaced by darkness. In that moment, the emperor's sorrow turned to fury. He unleashed his full power, the wrath of a god contained for countless millennia. His psychic light burned through the warp, obliterating Horus's body and soul. The War Master's form disintegrated, his essence consumed in a storm of divine fire. The emperor collapsed beside him, mortally wounded, his mortal shell destroyed. Rogel Dorn found him there, the father slain by the act of saving his species. With the last strength he had, the emperor was carried back to Terra. There, he was placed upon the golden throne not as a ruler, but as a corpse kept alive by machinery and faith. His mind trapped between life and death, his voice forever silent. The great crusade was over. The dream of unity was gone. Humanity had won, but at a cost so terrible it could never be undone. The emperor of mankind had saved his children, but he would never again walk among them. And thus began an age not of light, but of worship. The emperor who denied godhood became a god to billions. His imperium became a prison of devotion, and the golden throne that sustained him became both his tomb and humanity's salvation. What happens when your savior becomes your god, and your god never speaks again? 10,000 years have passed since the emperor fell upon the vengeful spirit. 10,000 years since the fires of the Horus Heresy consumed the stars. But though millennia have faded into dust, the galaxy has never known peace again. The emperor still sits upon the golden throne, his body a decaying relic of what was once perfection. His mind flickers like a dying sun, sustained by the endless sacrifice of souls. Every day, thousands perish to keep him alive, their spirits burned like fuel to power the machine that binds his existence. He does not move. He does not speak. Yet his will still shapes the destiny of mankind. Around him, an empire of uncountable worlds grovels in worship. The Imperium of man, once born of reason and enlightenment, has become a theocracy built on fear, ritual, and war. The very thing the emperor fought against, blind faith, now defines his empire. His name is whispered in every prayer, carved into every wall, sung by priests who have long forgotten his true purpose. To question the emperor is heresy. To doubt him is death. And yet, he never asked for worship. Across the stars, his angels of death, the space marines, still fight in his name. Each chapter now a relic of the legions that once conquered the galaxy. They are humanity's defenders, its executioners, and its martyrs. But even they are fading, their numbers too few, their enemies too many. Because the galaxy has not grown kinder in his absence. The warp storms have returned, worse than ever. The chaos gods still hunger, their daemons slipping through the cracks of reality to feast on mortal souls. The Xenos races rise and fall in endless waves, the insectoid tyranids devouring worlds whole, the soulless Necrons awakening from their tombs, and the green tide of orcs crashing against civilization like an unstoppable flood of madness. Yet through it all, mankind endures. And perhaps, that is his greatest miracle. For in the darkest corners of the Imperium, there are whispers that the Emperor still watches. That his soul, trapped within the golden throne, still guides humanity. That he speaks to chosen saints, to prophets, to warriors dying on battlefields lit by the fires of hell. Some claim to feel his light burning within them. Others say it is only madness, the echo of faith turned feverish. But one thing is certain, the Imperium survives, not because of what it has become, but because of what it still believes. Every man, every woman, every soldier who raises a weapon in his name does so with one hope, that their sacrifice still matters, that somewhere within that silent throne, the Emperor still remembers them. And though his body rots and his empire burns, the dream he forged refuses to die. He once sought to free mankind from superstition. Now, he is its God. He once sought to save humanity from darkness. Now, he is the only light left in a galaxy that has forgotten what dawn feels like. 10,000 years have passed, and still, humanity waits. Waits for the day the Emperor rises again. Waits for the day the golden throne shatters, and the God of mankind opens his eyes once more. Waits for the day the final war begins, when the last light of humanity either reignites, or is extinguished forever. Until that day, the Imperium fights on, blind, bleeding, but unbroken. And the Emperor, silent upon his throne, still burns. What if the end was never truly the end? What if the Emperor is not dead, but waiting? For 10,000 years, humanity has worshipped a corpse, a God who cannot speak, a savior who cannot act. But deep within the walls of the imperial palace, beneath endless cathedrals of gold and bone, ancient machines still hum. The golden throne still burns, devouring 1,000 souls a day to sustain its master. And somewhere inside that eternal blaze, the Emperor still is. There are those who claim to hear him not as a voice, but as a pulse in the soul. The Adeptus Custodes, his eternal guardians, say he yet commands them through silence. The Ecclesiarchy preaches that one day, he will rise again, leading mankind into a final, glorious war. And the Inquisition, those who hunt heresy across the stars, whisper that when he does, the galaxy itself will burn anew. Prophecy calls it the end times, the final crusade. A war to end all wars. The signs are already here. The Great Rift, a wound in the galaxy, has torn reality in half. Warp storms rage like never before. Half the Imperium is shrouded in shadow, cut off from light, communication, and hope. Worlds vanish overnight. Others emerge twisted beyond recognition. The Emperor's chosen champions like Robert Guilliman, the returned Primarch, now fight to hold back the darkness. His resurrection was a miracle, or a warning. For even Guilliman, the Emperor's most logical and faithful son, looks upon the Imperium and sees a nightmare. He walks among its people and wonders what his father would think of this empire of fanaticism and decay. And though he leads the Crusades in the Emperor's name, he knows the Emperor never wanted this. Yet still, the fires of faith burn stronger than ever. Millions die each day in his name. Billions pray for his return. And somewhere, buried beneath the weight of those prayers, something stirs. Some say the Emperor is dying, that the Golden Throne is failing, that the machine keeping him alive can no longer sustain his vast psychic power. Others believe he is transforming, evolving into something far greater than the flesh he once wore. A true God, not by belief, but by will. And if that is true, then the galaxy stands upon the edge of revelation or annihilation. Because the Emperor's return would not be a gentle salvation. It would be judgment. 10,000 years of corruption, heresy, and false faith would be washed away in fire. Humanity would be reborn or erased. Perhaps he waits for the final spark. Perhaps he listens still, from within that throne of endless light. Perhaps every prayer, every death, every whispered for the Emperor draws him closer to awakening. Or perhaps he already has. There are stories hushed, forbidden, of warriors whose wounds healed by golden fire, of daemons banished by a voice that spoke from the void, of visions in which the Emperor walks the battlefield once more, his armor blazing like the sun. Whether these tales are truth or madness, none can say. But all agree on one thing: something is coming. And when it does, the galaxy will tremble. The stars themselves will scream. And the Emperor of mankind will rise not as the ruler humanity remembers, but as the God it created through 10,000 years of pain and prayer. The end will not be peaceful. It will not be merciful. It will be the final war, where faith and fire meet. And when the last weapon falls silent, when the warp itself is purged or consumes all, only one question will remain. Was he humanity's savior, or its destroyer? Because in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no peace. There is only war. If gods can die, then what hope is left for men? 10,000 years have passed, and still, the galaxy turns beneath the weight of its sins. Stars are born and die, empires rise and crumble, but the Imperium endures not out of strength, but out of sheer defiance. Humanity has become what it was never meant to be, an empire of ashes clinging to the bones of its creator. The Emperor's throne still burns with unholy brilliance. Beneath it, the mechanisms groan, ancient and failing, fed by sacrifice upon sacrifice. Billions have died so that one being may never die completely. Every scream that feeds the throne is a prayer, every life consumed is a candle burned for the God who cannot answer. And yet, he endures. Through the veil of death, through the endless hum of machinery, through the prayers of the dying, he watches. He cannot speak. He cannot move. But his will, his sheer, relentless will still binds mankind to existence. Every psychic spark in the warp, every flicker of human thought, touches the Emperor's shadow. His mind stretches across realities, holding back the chaos that forever hungers. Without him, the Imperium would fall in a single heartbeat. Humanity would drown in the screams of demons. The stars themselves would go dark. And perhaps that is why he does not awaken. For to rise again, he must first let go of what he holds together. To save humanity anew, he must first let it fall. So he waits. In silence. In agony. In eternity. The warriors of the Imperium still fight for him, though few truly understand who or what he was. The High Lords twist his name for power. The ecclesiarchy sells his image for faith. The Inquisition burns in his name to preserve their fear. And across it all, the Emperor's light flickers on not as glory, but as endurance. Because that was always his truest gift to mankind, not salvation, not perfection, but endurance. For all their wars, for all their corruption and cruelty, humanity refuses to die. Even when the universe itself conspires against them, even when gods laugh and the stars bleed, mankind fights on. And perhaps, in some small way, that means the Emperor's dream never truly died. Maybe the Imperium's faith, twisted though it is, still keeps him alive. Maybe the souls of those who fight and fall in his name still reach him in the warp, reminding him that his creation still burns, still bleeds, still hopes. And if one day, in some distant future, the throne goes silent, if the machines cease their song and the light finally fades, perhaps that will not be the end. Perhaps, after all this time, it will be the beginning he once promised. Perhaps the Emperor will rise not as a god of war, but as the man who once loved humanity enough to die for it. Until then, he waits. And the galaxy, in its endless, terrible beauty, continues to burn, lit by the faith of those who refuse to surrender. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, hope is a heresy, and yet, it is the only thing mankind has left. But what happens when a legend becomes louder than the truth? 10,000 years is a long time. Long enough for facts to fade, for memories to rot, and for lies to become scripture. The man who once stood against gods has now become one. To most of humanity, the Emperor is no longer a father, no longer a savior. He is an eternal flame of divinity, an unreachable being, a god who demands devotion without mercy. But the truth is buried beneath the gold and blood. The Emperor never wanted worship. He never asked for temples. He never demanded prayers. He dreamed of reason, of unity, of mankind standing proud without chains of faith. But now, faith is the only thing holding that dream together. Across the galaxy, worlds burn in his name. Planets are purged, heretics silenced, and civilizations reshaped not by his hand, but by those who claim to speak for him. The High Lords twist his words into weapons, the Inquisition drowns entire systems to protect his purity, and the ecclesiarchy paints the universe with sermons and fire. And somewhere, beneath the endless hum of the golden throne, perhaps the Emperor still hears it all. Perhaps he still feels every word, every act of cruelty justified by his name. And maybe, just maybe, he weeps. But the galaxy does not stop for sorrow. Chaos still howls beyond the veil. The ruinous powers hunger for mankind's soul. And the Emperor's sons, his broken, scattered primarchs, still haunt the stars. Some fight for his vision. Others fight against it. And a few have become monsters so far gone that even the gods of chaos tremble to claim them. Yet still, humanity endures. Not because of the Emperor's miracles, but because his dream refuses to die completely. Somewhere, on a forgotten world, a child looks up to the stars and whispers his name, not in worship, but in hope. And that is something chaos will never understand. They can twist faith, they can devour souls, but they cannot kill the spark that the Emperor planted in mankind, the defiance, the will to fight even when the universe itself says no. So the legend grows. The myth strengthens. And the Emperor's echo becomes louder than ever, a sound that drowns out reason, yet keeps humanity alive. Because in a galaxy of gods and daemons, the Emperor has become something greater than both. An idea that cannot die. And perhaps that is the cruelest irony of all, that the man who sought to free humanity from faith has become its greatest religion. But still, even in this corruption of his vision, there remains something pure. Something human. Something eternal. The Emperor may never rise again. But his echo? That will never fade. Can a father's dream survive when his children destroy it? The Emperor created his sons not as equals, but as extensions of his will, fragments of his soul, scattered across the stars. Each primarch was meant to embody a part of his perfection: courage, loyalty, intellect, faith, and wrath. But the warp, ever jealous, twisted that creation. The primarches were stolen, flung across worlds, raised by strangers under alien skies. And when he finally found them, they were not the sons he had lost, they were men, shaped by the cruelties of their new worlds, by pain, by ambition, by fear. Some became noble. Some became monsters. All became legends. Robert Gilliman, the architect, a symbol of reason and order. He fights even now, a living echo of the Emperor's dream, trying to rebuild what has already died. Leman Russ, the wolf, fierce, loyal, yet forever wild. His loyalty was pure, but his rage unstoppable. Sanguinius, the angel beauty incarnate, with the heart of a martyr. His death was prophecy and punishment. Horus, the brightest star, beloved beyond all others, until he fell, and dragged half of creation into hell with him. Each primarch was a mirror of their father's light, and each cracked under its weight. The Horus Heresy was not just a war of betrayal. It was the shattering of family, the breaking of divinity itself. The Emperor's greatest victory gave birth to his greatest curse. His sons, forged to save mankind, nearly ended it. And when Horus fell, it was not only the traitor who died that day. Something inside the Emperor broke too, something no throne, no machine, no godhood could repair. The surviving primarchs scattered across the galaxy, carrying their father's guilt like a wound that never heals. Some vanished into legend. Others turned into nightmares. And a few, just a few, still fight in his name, believing that one day he might return. But perhaps they do not realize the truth. The Emperor never left them. He never could. His essence flows through their veins, through every human who dares to dream of something greater than survival. In a galaxy drowned in blood, the primarchs are not just warriors, they are symbols. Proof that even in failure, the emperors will endure. Each of them, saint or monster, carries his reflection, distorted by time and sorrow. Because the truth is simple, and terrible. The emperor never needed gods. He needed men. And his sons, for all their power, forgot that. Now, the galaxy pays the price, a price written in 10,000 years of war. And yet, through it all, one thing remains. The fire he lit still burns. The dream still flickers, fragile, trembling, but alive. The sons of the emperor may have damned the stars. But the father's vision refuses to die. What if the emperor never meant to return? For 10,000 years, mankind has waited. 10,000 years of endless blood and sacrifice, of priests whispering of his rebirth, of prophets crying that the emperor will walk again when the stars are right. But prophecy, like faith, is a double-edged blade. Some say he sleeps within the throne, gathering strength, waiting for the right moment to awaken and cast judgment upon his children. Others say he is dead and that what remains is nothing but the echo of a god who once was. And then there are those few, the most dangerous of all, who whisper that he never died at all, that his mind still reaches across the warp, guiding every fate, shaping every soul, unseen but omnipresent. But if that is true, then every war, every atrocity, every sacrifice, happens because he wills it. And that is a truth too heavy for most to bear. The Imperium feeds itself on the promise of his return. It is their only hope, their only reason to endure the endless night. But hope can become a chain. And perhaps, that was never his design. Maybe the Emperor's truest test was never about his resurrection but about what mankind would become without him. Would they build, or destroy? Would they rise, or rot? Even Robert Guilliman, his resurrected son, has begun to question the myth. He stands at the head of a decaying empire, wielding the light of reason against the tide of madness, yet even he knows the emperor he serves is not the man he once knew. He is something else. Something vast. Something terrible. And across the stars, there are whispers. That one day, the golden throne will fail. That its mechanisms, older than memory, will finally collapse. And when that day comes, the astronomicon, the light that guides every ship in the void, will vanish. The galaxy will drown in warp storms. The Imperium will be blind. And in that darkness, he will rise. Not as a man. Not even as a god. But as what comes after gods. Some call it the Star Child, the rebirth of his pure essence, untainted by the rot of the Imperium. Others say it will be his end, the final death of the Emperor, and the birth of something new. No one knows which is true. Perhaps both are. But one truth remains: he is the Imperium. His body may be still, his voice silent, but his will shapes reality itself. Every prayer, every sacrifice, every act of faith feeds him. And so, maybe he does not need to awaken. Maybe the galaxy already lives inside his dream. And when the last human speaks his name, when the final battle is fought and the stars fall into silence, perhaps then, the Emperor will finally open his eyes. Not to rule. Not to conquer. But to see what his children became in the age of endless war. Until then, the galaxy burns. And the Emperor dreams. What if the Emperor's greatest victory was that he never truly died? Across 10,000 years of agony and faith, the galaxy still whispers his name. In the dark void between the stars, where hope should not exist, his dream still breathes, fragile, stubborn, eternal. The Imperium stands as both his triumph and his tragedy. A monument built from the bones of his vision. A shrine to everything he tried to destroy, yet also the only thing keeping mankind alive. That is the cruel paradox of the Emperor. He became the very god he once despised, because his creation could not survive without one. And yet, through all the horror, through all the lies, humanity still fights. Still endures. Still dreams. And maybe that's what he wanted all along. Not blind obedience. Not perfection. But the unbreakable will to go on, even when everything says stop. Because in the grim darkness of the far future, the Emperor is not just a man, nor a god. He is the reflection of humanity itself, brilliant and terrible, compassionate and cruel, divine and broken. He is every victory and every sin that mankind has ever committed, bound together in golden agony. And so long as humanity endures, so too will he. Every soldier who fights on a dying world. Every mother who prays for her child's safety under a blood-red sky. Every soul who refuses to kneel before chaos. They are all part of him. The Emperor's light may flicker. The Imperium may crumble. But his essence, his dream is eternal. For in every heartbeat of mankind, in every whisper of faith and defiance, the Emperor still lives. Not as a corpse upon a throne, but as the will that will not break. And when the last star fades, and the universe falls into silence, perhaps he will finally rest, not because he has won, but because mankind no longer needs him. Until that day comes, the Emperor endures. And so does humanity. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.